Donald Trump also lashing out this afternoon with a post on Truth Social saying, I'm going to read this verbatim here, "We are holding Canada responsible for the fact that they are not properly maintaining their forests and bush therein, and the United States is being unnecessarily invaded by filthy, polluted, and unhealthy air." He continues, "the quality of which is dangerous and totally unacceptable." And Trump then says he is going to call Prime Minister Mark Carney to discuss this. And he also warns the wildfires are costing the U.S. billions and billions of dollars and must be added on to the tariffs that Canada is currently paying. So he's effectively proposing here a tariff on Canadian wildfires and smoke crossing the border. First it was fentanyl, now it's bad air.
A tariff on wildfire smoke. That is what Donald Trump just proposed. While Canadian firefighters are risking their lives battling one of the worst wildfire seasons this country has seen in decades, while entire communities have been forced to evacuate, while a pilot from British Columbia gave his life fighting fires in Colorado, helping Americans on American soil, Trump looked at that tragedy and decided it was a trade dispute, not a moment for compassion, not a moment for solidarity between neighbors who have helped each other through every natural disaster for generations, a tariff opportunity. And tonight Canada Point is breaking down exactly how Carney shut that down, how Doug Ford responded, and why the contrast between Canadian leadership and American political theater has never been more visible. Subscribe right now because this story is about more than wildfires. It is about what kind of neighbor America has become under Trump. Before we get to the responses, let us establish what Trump's Truth Social post deliberately ignored. First, wildfires are not caused by poor forest management. They are caused by rising temperatures, creating drought conditions that turn forests into tinder. The Canadian boreal forest covers 552 million hectares. The overwhelming majority of it is uninhabited wilderness that no government on Earth could practically manage in the way Trump suggested. Second, while Trump was blaming Canada for smoke crossing the border, hundreds of wildfires were burning across the United States, simultaneously consuming 1.4 million hectares of American territory this same summer. Third, Canada has repeatedly sent water bombers, personnel, and resources to help fight American wildfires in California and elsewhere. That is what good neighbors do. That is what Canada does without demanding payment or threatening trade consequences. And fourth, a Canadian pilot from British Columbia died in a crash while fighting fires in Colorado, giving his life to protect American communities. Trump proposed a tariff on the smoke drifting from that tragedy.
But it is a fantasy to think that anyone, the U.S. or Canada, could prevent this by better managing the massive boreal forests that run essentially the length of our entire country, 552 million hectares, and most of them uninhabited and far from any communities. And of course, those messages from Trump and the others ignore the hundreds of wildfires, Alan, that are currently burning across their country and have already this summer consumed 1.4 million hectares of their territory.
A fantasy. That is what a Canadian journalist called Trump's forest management argument. Not an exaggeration, not partisan spin, a factual assessment that managing 552 million hectares of wilderness to prevent natural wildfires caused by global temperature rise is simply not possible. And then the detail that exposes the breathtaking hypocrisy at the center of Trump's post. While he was blaming Canada for smoke crossing the border, American wildfires had already consumed 1.4 million hectares of American territory this summer. American forests burning, American smoke filling American skies, American communities evacuating. Trump did not post about American forest mismanagement. He did not propose tariffs on American states for failing to manage their own wilderness. He aimed exclusively at Canada. Because this was never about forest management. This was about finding another angle to apply pressure on a country that has spent a year refusing to submit. Doug Ford's response to Trump's comments was everything you would expect from a man who has spent the past year refusing to let a tax on Canada go unanswered. He did not escalate. He did not trade insult for insult. He simply reminded Americans of something their own president seemed to have forgotten. Canada sends help when neighbors need it. That is what good neighbors do. If you have a problem with smoke crossing borders, maybe instead of complaining, you should send support. Simple, direct, and devastating in its simplicity.
I truly believe the Americans are good neighbors. If there's some politicians out there chirping away, well, maybe what you should do rather than complain is send support, send help, because we have done the exact same thing for our American friends, and that's what you're supposed to do.
That is what you are supposed to do. 7 words. And they carry the weight of every water bomber Canada has ever sent south, every firefighter who crossed the border to help, every Canadian who has looked at a natural disaster affecting Americans and said, what can we do to help without waiting to be asked? Ford is not attacking Trump supporters. He is not questioning the American people. He is drawing a clear line between American citizens who have historically been good neighbors and a political class that has decided bashing Canada is good electoral strategy. And his instinct is right. Because Trump's post was not born from genuine anger about wildfire smoke. It was born from the same calculation driving every attack on Canada. Keep the pressure on. Find new angles. Make Ottawa feel constantly under siege. What Ford and Carney both understood is that responding with dignity rather than outrage is the most powerful thing Canada can do. And then came Carney, responding not to the politics of Trump's post, but to the substance of what Republican lawmakers were actually claiming in their letter to Ottawa. Their letter accused Canadian provincial leaders of offering excuses instead of results, said American lungs were paying the price for Canadian inaction. Carney did not respond with anger. He responded with facts, and he delivered a line that should be quoted in every conversation about climate responsibility between these two countries.
Now we're focusing on investing in clean energy. In the U.S., there's prohibitions now against clean energy. For example, wind energy is one example. Secondly, Canada is maintaining our efforts at the world's scale, and the U.S. is reducing their efforts globally. So, yes, climate change is the responsibility of everyone.
Climate change is the responsibility of everyone. 4 words that expose the entire contradiction at the heart of Trump's wildfire attack on Canada. Canada is investing in clean energy. The United States under Trump has banned wind energy development. Canada is maintaining its international climate commitments. The United States has withdrawn from global climate cooperation. Canada is trying to address the root causes of increasingly severe wildfire seasons. The United States is making it harder to do so. And then Trump posts that Canada is responsible for the smoke. The audacity of that position would be almost funny if the consequences were not so serious. Communities displaced, firefighters risking their lives, a Canadian pilot dead on American soil helping American communities. Carney did not shout any of that. He simply laid out the facts and let the conclusion draw itself. Canada is doing the work. America under this administration is not. And a country that bans wind energy and withdraws from global climate efforts does not get to lecture its neighbors about environmental responsibility. But let us come back to the moment that should stop every Canadian in their tracks when they think about Trump's wildfire post, a pilot from British Columbia, flying to Colorado, fighting fires on American land to protect American communities, dying in a crash while doing so. That happened this summer, while Trump was drafting his Truth Social post about Canadian forest mismanagement and wildfire tariffs. A Canadian had just given his life, helping Americans deal with their own wildfire crisis. There is no political framing that makes that contrast acceptable. There is no trade negotiation context that explains it away. There is no version of good neighbor behavior that looks like what Trump posted. Canada sent its people to protect America, and America's president responded by threatening to add their smoke to a tariff list. That is the story. And every Canadian deserves to hear it stated plainly. Natural disasters do not recognize borders. Smoke does not stop at customs. Wildfires do not care about trade negotiations or Truth Social posts or midterm election strategies. They burn, and they affect everyone on both sides of every border they reach. For generations, Canada and the United States have understood that shared geography means shared responsibility when nature turns destructive. Water bombers flying south when California burns. Canadian firefighters crossing the border when American communities are threatened. No invoices, no conditions, no tariff threats. Because that is what neighbors do. Trump looked at a wildfire season affecting both countries and saw a trade opportunity. Carney looked at the same crisis and said, climate change is the responsibility of everyone. Ford looked at politicians chirping from a safe distance and said, send help instead. The difference between those responses is not political. It is human. And it is why Canadians watching this story this week felt something deeper than frustration at a social media post. They felt the specific sting of generosity being answered with accusation, of sacrifice being met with blame, of a neighbor who has always shown up being told they owe more. Canada will keep showing up, because that is who Canadians are. And the contrast with what is happening in Washington right now could not be clearer. Subscribe to Canada Point for honest analysis of the stories shaping Canada's relationship with the world. Turn on notifications, and we will see you in the next one.